Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 309. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another co-hosted episode with the fantastic Joanna Hennon. Today we are talking about why it's okay to openly be the weirdo and how expressing our unique weirdness can change our lives. Both of us have been opening up about the weird stuff we do and the weird stuff we believe lately, and that was the inspiration for today's topic. Now, I know this is something that I've touched upon quite a bit lately when it comes to my book, talking about going on national television, talking about talking to trees, and how that's been really challenging and how I've gotten to this point. However, I think this is something that can be life-changing for everyone, because expressing our guilty pleasures, expressing the things that we like and do that are maybe not so mainstream, can be life-changing. It can help us to live more fully. It can help us to step more fully into who we are. And I think the more that we do that, and the more that we know ourselves, the more rich our lives become. So I hope you find this episode interesting and useful. Some of the things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about why it's important to be more open and talk about the things that we really like. We discuss why it can be so difficult to admit to liking or doing things that are different, especially when they're wildly different, like talking to trees. We discuss why people have guilty pleasures and why sometimes we're ashamed of the things that we like or talking about them. We discuss how to open up and express ourselves more fully. We talk about how our fear of judgment keeps us in the sidelines and how to come out of the sidelines. We also discuss why it's not easy for anyone to do that, why it's not easy for us to step up and express ourselves fully, and why it's scary and how to do that even when it's scary. We talk about why we need more unique voices in a world of so much sameness. We share examples of people that we think do this well and how they stand out in the online crowd. We discuss how sharing a totally different message to the mainstream challenges other people's ways of thinking and why that's good. We talk about why this is ultimately about us giving ourselves permission to be openly different. And we share questions that you can ask yourself to get clarity on where you're hiding in the shadows and how you can come out of the shadows. So I hope you find this interesting and useful, and I hope it's one more step on the path to really fully embodying yourself and who you are and expressing that in the world. So without further ado, here is today's episode. Hey, Joanna.
Hi, Holly.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
So today we are talking about being open about our weirdness and expressing our unique interests and stuff that we do in the world in an open way, rather than kind of like hiding it and being secretive about it. And we're going to be talking about why this is so important and why we think that more people need to be stepping up and doing this openly rather than kind of hiding our guilty pleasures and being ashamed of the things that we like to do.
And also why it's so difficult, so that we don't want to give people a false impression that this is easy for anybody.
Yeah.
But once you understand why it's difficult, then maybe it'll become that little bit easier because you'll have more awareness.
Yeah.
So why are we talking about this, Holly?
We're talking about this because we're both going through a couple of things where we're talking about different things that aren't very mainstream, things that are triggering to people. I just launched a book a couple months ago about talking to trees. I went on national television in the UK where I talked to a tree. and dealt with all the backlash that comes from stepping up and openly talking about weird stuff to a mainstream audience.
Yep. You did do all that.
I did do all that.
You did do all that. Yep. And I am relaunching my business. Basically, that's what it is. I'm relaunching everything with a focus on manifesting as shifting into parallel realities. So I've been talking about this concept of parallel realities for ages, but now I'm really putting it at the center of what I offer and of just my way of manifesting something different, a different reality. And both of these things, talking to trees and believing in, the multiverse and being able to shift from one reality to another reality, these are weird things.
Yeah, they're not mainstream things. However, I kind of feel like these topics are at least making themselves into mainstream entertainment.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very interesting sign of people being open to this stuff, at least in a fictional setting, which I think is a sign that things are moving forward and people are opening their minds. I think Lost opened up a whole new realm of entertainment based on weird stuff.
Wow, you think so?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Black Mirror, that's all weird stuff. And I mean, that's weird stuff based on technology, but still futuristic. And although I'm saying that, but my husband and I have also been watching The Twilight Zone lately, the original series from 1959. And I am shocked by how, I mean, granted, it's the Twilight Zone. It's this weird stuff happens in the Twilight Zone. But it's weird stuff. It's parallel reality stuff. It's very modern themes. And season 1 of that series aired in 1959. That show is so ahead of its time. And it was an outlier. But I feel now we're getting lots more stuff like that.
I mean, I think over the years, there has been lots. I mean, Buffy, which is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is my favorite show ever in the whole universe. I think that's the smartest thing that's ever been on TV is Buffy.
Wow.
Yeah, I really do. And I'm willing to defend that in a whole different conversation if you want.
That might be a separate episode.
I'm the geek who bought all the Watcher's guides and I've theses and all sorts. Anyway. So, but there's lots of stuff on there, obviously, about parallel worlds and kind of weird things happening and anything that, I guess, any show that has a bit of magic in it shows that element.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say you're right. It is getting more into mainstream, at least entertainment, but it's still considered fiction.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the fact that we're creating lots of mainstream entertainment about this means that people are at least open to being entertained by these concepts. I don't know. It's becoming more a part of our life. I mean, you look at Neil Gaiman has 2 TV series on Amazon Prime now. He's got American Gods and he's got Good Omens. That's fantasy, but that's magical weird in a modern setting. So yeah, I don't know.
I think it satisfies people's curiosity. My personal theory is that when people who are really drawn to certain topics like that, it's because their soul recognizes a bit of truth.
Yeah.
And of course it's not exactly as it happens in Good Omens. Yeah. I can't imagine that. But that doesn't matter. Of course we add story and entertainment to these concepts, but people tend to like entertainment with certain themes. And I think that's because a part of them kind of recognizes that as something that's truth, something that makes sense to them somehow,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important for us to be open about the weird stuff that we like because it's the only way to normalize it. I mean, I'm aware that when I went on TV talking about trees, I mean, yeah, that was kind of crazy. But people do talk to trees. And as a result of writing this book, I've been shocked at how many kind of normal, and I say this with air quotes, people have written to me and said, oh yeah, I had a great conversation with an oak tree last year. Or, I talked to the tree in my local park. Like, so many people that I wouldn't have thought talk to trees. So
Yeah.
by being open about this and by stepping up and having the guts to talk about it in scary, open spaces, we're making it easier for other people to talk about this.
Yeah, and like when you talk about this, the talking to trees, it just makes me think that like you don't have to inspire everybody to be talking to trees. But what I noticed, and I looked through all the comments on social media on your interview that time, Holly, just to be able to report back, and there were some, not so nice comments, sure, but I was really surprised by how many comments there were from people who wouldn't talk to trees or wouldn't like consider themselves spiritual, but who said, you know what, it's true that I always feel better when I'm in the trees, when I'm in the woods. And so, or people who talk to their houseplants, so stuff like that, it normalizes that. And that's important because even this week, there was something in the news about them. They've set like a standard for how much time you should spend in nature per week.
Oh, wow.
For your mental health. Like they've set the, 10,000 steps a day and the, 5 fruits or vegetables per day and whatever. They've also set a thing now for being in nature. It has nothing to do with exercise. Like it said, you just have to sit there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be trees. It can be the beach. It can be whatever, but like in nature. And that apparently does wonderful things for our health and well-being. So by you talking about this stuff, like they don't have to go all the way where you are, but it brings that whole area of nature as something, that's a real part of our lives into people's
awareness. Yeah.
And so they can do something with that.
Yeah. And the whole point of the book was not now you go out and talk to trees. It's you go out and connect with nature in whatever way is right for you. So, but it gets people talking about it. And especially when something is so controversial because it's so different, it gets the conversation going. I mean, that one interview was picked up by so many different media outlets and it's gotten me so many other speaking opportunities. So I think that's another reason why it's so important to be open about this because people are interested. Like it's something that people want to hear about.
Yeah, I had the same kind of surprise. I went through this surprise the first time that I did anything on parallel realities. I just did like a live stream in my Facebook group years and years ago now. And I was so shocked at how many people were curious about this, And I think because my approach to it, like I actually do believe in it because I've read like tons of the science behind it. So like, I have an idea of why it works this way and why it's possible. But more interesting, I think, is the idea that it can help us, right? So I think people find my approach to something that's very weird, refreshing, because at the end of the day, I don't really care if it's real or not.
Yeah.
I only care if it helps you create the reality you want or create a life you like better.
Yes, exactly. Does it help you? Does it serve you? Is it useful to you? Then great, do it.
Yeah.
There's a review on my book on Amazon.com from someone saying, yes, but we need to have someone corroborate these conversations and we need to have someone else go out and talk to these trees and see if they say the same things that she says they're saying. And I'm, yes. And I'm like, dude, do you have the same exact conversation with every single human being that you come across? No. So neither will the trees. Like if you, Joanna, go and talk to all the trees from my book, they're going to tell you something different because you're a different person. You're going to have a different conversation, So, but like people.
We can try that. In Glastonbury. I can see if that tree in Breed's Garden said the same thing that you say it said, Holly.
Yeah, exactly. Word for word, the same conversation. So like, why did I even say that? What were we talking about? I lost myself.
I think we were talking about why it's important.
Yeah, it's important.
But we're going to now move on.
Sorry.
Because I think we're drifting a bit.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to move on to why it's difficult to talk about things that are a little bit different, that kind of position us as not the norm. And that's the second time we use that word norm or normal in this conversation. Both of us in air quotes, and yet we use it.
Yeah.
So there is like, we collectively have this concept of normal and not normal. And obviously everybody wants to be normal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody wants to belong
Yeah.
to something that's considered positive rather than negative.
Yeah.
Because abnormal is considered negative.
Yeah.
So why do you think it was so? Because let's make it, let's be really honest and clear, right? You didn't find it super easy to talk about talking to trees, and you went through a very long process of even getting ready to be able to do that. Like, you procrastinated on writing that book for ages.
Yeah.
And like, what was so difficult about coming out with this material in this way?
So I think it's just really scary because I'm aware that not everyone talks to trees. And people would say to me, well, how is it that you hear how do they talk to you? And I'd be like, well, I hear voices in my head. And aware of how that sounds, because that could sound like a mental illness. It could sound like a personality disorder. And in trying to explain to people why I don't think that that's the case, why I think that I am actually talking to something.
You don't want people to view you as crazy.
Exactly. And of course, that was some of the response that I got from the interview. A lot of people said, well, this woman's clearly mentally ill. She's crazy. She needs help, which I understand. Like, I expected that. But yeah, I was definitely afraid of that. I was afraid of not being taken seriously. I was afraid of people making fun of me. I was afraid of all that.
And also, I think, like, I have all of those, by the way, with the parallel reality stuff. I'm also afraid, like, if I start talking about, like, shifting to other realities, I think people's, like, eyes glaze over and they start, I can see what happens on their face. They're like, oh, crazy person. I think I'm also scared of people wanting me to prove it.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's various fears there from what other people will think or how they'll react or what they'll say to us, right? So it's fear of judgment.
Yeah, fear of judgment. I think that's the biggest thing. I think it all boils down to fear of judgment.
And everybody has that, right? Even though, like, we can say, oh, I don't really care what other people think. Like, I have come, I'm 42 years old now. Like, I don't really care what people think about me. But in this particular instance, it still comes up. And I'm like, well, actually, like, I don't mind if people think that I'm, like, I don't know, like, not ambitious or that I don't, like, I'm not the perfect version of a woman because I don't wear Prada clothes. Like, I don't,
I love that example.
I've let go of, a lot of those things.
Yeah.
But I still don't want people to think I'm crazy.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this goes back to what we were talking about before we hit record, which is, I think this goes back way, 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 way back in history, prehistory, from hunter-gatherer days, when it was so important to fit in with the tribe, because if you were ostracized by the tribe and if they cast you out for whatever reason, you were probably going to die.
And I think it's probably safe to say that a lot of us going through this stuff right now in past lives have been ostracized by a tribe of some kind or some kind of community and probably did suffer. Yeah. So there are like these layers, I think, of stuff within us. And so we try to fit in, right? And we were taught that from the start. Like, we were also talking about childhood and high school and things. Like, anything in those situations, anything that's just a little, in any way out of the norm is considered bad. When I was a child, like, you don't fit in any way at all. So then you try to fit in. Like, that's your natural reaction to that, right?
And I think this goes even back before high school, like elementary school. Like, how many kids were bullied in elementary school? I luckily never was, because I tried so hard to be invisible. Like, we all know now that I have, autism, Asperger's. I am weird in my head, but like, I tried so hard to fit in. Joanna's laughing. I tried so hard to fit in when I was a little kid, and I tried so hard to be invisible. So I never got bullied.
Right.
At all.
Whereas,
because no one ever probably even knew I existed, because I was so like, woo, invisibility cloak. Like, before the invisibility cloak even existed, because Harry Potter wasn't around when we were kids, but like, no one saw me enough to bully me.
Right. I was being bullied, but I didn't know because I also have Asperger's and I don't understand what people do around me.
So many times it'll take me like a week to realize that someone's actually insulted me. I'm like, oh, that's what they meant. Oh.
So I just, so like my memories from those days are just like, kind of just like, I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on. And now looking back, I'm like, I have words for what was happening.
Yeah.
But it wasn't upsetting to me at all because I didn't understand it. But I do remember wanting to be like the other girls,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be popular.
Yeah.
I wanted all those things. Like the books I chose to read were about social situations, about high school. And this brings up the other side of the coin, I think. So on the one hand, we don't want to be ostracized. We don't want to be kicked out of the community or the tribe. But on the other hand, we don't want to be put in a box, called crazy or called weirdo, or we don't want to be defined by certain things, for certain choices that other people find weird. Like, I don't particularly want to be the crazy lady because I believe in parallel realities, right? And I think I shift, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to be put in that box because I also have other things that define me, that are part of my personality, that are part of me. And not all of them say crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't talk to trees all day, every day. Like, that's not like my...
That's your life now.
Yeah, this is my life now. I'm just going to go to the woods and sit there forever.
Oh my God, that's so funny. If this wasn't like a recorded conversation, I would just like die laughing right now.
I mean, as much as sometimes I would like to just the woods. Not saying that's like unacceptable lifestyle to me, but that's not the lifestyle I choose to live.
Yeah, right? Like, I think this is part of the problem because those weird things, like, we tend to focus on those weird things in people and think that that's all there is to that person. And it's not. Like, it'll be one bit.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It'll be one facet of that person. I mean, there are people who kind of are weird all day long, and that's okay.
Weird all day long.
This is probably not coming out right. Like, weird is not bad. I think that's our basic premise, right?
It's just different. Exactly. But as children, like, we're kind of taught that weird is different. You don't want to stand out. You don't want to be the weirdo. Whereas when you grow up and you're an adult, it's important to be different. It's important to express your uniqueness because that's what's going to make you stand out in your job, in your career, in your school, in your business, in your life.
I disagree.
Oh, really?
I disagree.
Okay, good. All right.
I think, like, nobody wants to be different even as an adult. I think, like, we have this conversation because we've experienced the world of online business. As an entrepreneur, yes, you have to stand out. But for your job, you want to fit in. Every company, every organization has a corporate culture of some kind. Like, I know, like, people do the weirdest things in the name of corporate culture to belong to their corporate culture. Is the weird, like, I've heard some really weird stories. And you need to fit in. You need to wear the suit. You need to say, be a certain way in meetings. You need to read certain newspapers. Otherwise, you're never going to get further. And the same for, like, becoming a parent, becoming a mom. You don't want to be different. You want to do what all the other moms are doing so that you're accepted as one of the moms who know what they're doing. Like, you don't want to be the weird one out. Everybody's going to judge your choices. So I think there are areas of life where it's actually, even as an adult, the natural thing to do is to want to fit in.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the natural thing to do. But, like, for example, at your job, like, maybe you don't want to stand out for being the woman who believes in parallel realities because that's not appropriate. But maybe you want to stand out as being, like, the best person on the sales team or the best at, like, that job.
But that's not your weirdness. That's just a competitive, performance thing, right?
Okay, true.
So this is, like, I think, we don't have tribes, but we do have communities and we do have organizations and we belong to certain things. And within those things, there are certain norms and certain rules that we follow. I think the reason we talk about this here is because we've broken out of a lot of those communities. And so when you're a solopreneur or an author or, someone whose entire thing depends just on you, then you don't have those norms. Although the entrepreneur space also has norms. The online space also has norms. And before we hit record on this, we also talked about that, right? Like, that everybody's the same.
Yeah, there's so much sameness.
Yeah, because there's a certain kind of, certain things that you aspire to. You aspire to like having an Instagram account and posting things on your Facebook page and like being inspirational and posting a tip a week and like whatever those things are. There are certain norms that we aspire to, that we take on as the goal.
And even in terms of like language that people use, there's so much sameness there as well. Like so many emails that, you read, they're kind of told in the same way, and you can tell they're getting to this thing that they're going to sell you. And it's everyone's using the same formula.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone, but most, but a lot of people are. And so there are norms, right? Yeah. And when you first join, what do? You join some kind of program, you get some kind of mentor, and then you see how things are done, right? This is the appropriate way to run a Facebook group. This is the appropriate way to be on Twitter. Like, what do you share on Twitter? What do you share on Facebook? Like, you're told certain norms. It's the same as corporate culture, right? And you want to fit in. It's really, for the reasons we just mentioned, it's really hard to be the one who states the unpopular opinion or is totally different from anything else anyone has ever seen. And yet, those are the people who get noticed because we crave that.
Yes, we crave something different.
Otherwise, it just gets so boring out there.
Yeah.
So I always notice, and I'm very aware of this now, and I've stopped buying anything that's just different, because for a while I found myself whenever I noticed that someone was saying something different or expressing a different opinion to everybody else or whatever, or doing things in a different way, doesn't matter if I agreed with the opinion or if I liked the different way, I would buy from them because I'd be like, oh, that it would just catch my attention. I was like, oh, that's great, And I've stopped doing that now, of course, thankfully, because that's not the point. It's just to notice that those are the things that catch your attention, right?
Yeah, and maybe notice why that catches your attention, why you like that person. What is it that attracts you to that person?
Exactly. And the common denominator is just that they're different.
Yeah. They're doing things differently. They're saying things differently.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, Holly, but I do know about you. I don't know about the listeners here. But I get just so sick of even the words that I used to use, greatness and play a bigger game and all this stuff and take over the world.
Yeah,
up level and change the world and everybody's using these and they've lost their meaning. So when, for example, on a podcast I listened to, a man called Paul Jarvis was mentioned as having written a book called The Company of One, and being, I think, actually, you know what? It was on Joanna Penn's podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And his whole idea is to question, why do we have to grow? As business owners, do we actually have to grow? Does everybody actually have to aspire to having a VA in a team or not? Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's really refreshing. I don't know. And so, I started reading some of his stuff, not because necessarily I was like, oh my God, he's so right.
Yeah.
But, oh, that's refreshing.
It's
that's
different.
A different perspective.
Yeah.
It's different. So I'm going to explore that. And so this is a great reason to allow yourself to express things that maybe are not the norm, again, in inverted commas, because that's what gets you noticed, right? That's what makes you stand out.
And as you said earlier, and I think this is a really important thing to call out, because we were talking about calling this episode Why It's Okay to Openly Be the Weirdo, but as you've clearly said, there's a time and a place to openly express your weirdness. And maybe at your corporate job is not the place.
I think when you're comfortable with your own weirdness, then it's just natural to just be you wherever you are.
Yeah.
And whether, one of our examples of someone who does this really well, of expressing weirdness really well, of really being themselves, really being themselves completely 100% is Leonie Dawson, whose former academy is where Holly and I met.
Yay!
So Leonie, I don't think she teaches business anymore, but she taught business in a very kind of colorful, creative, artsy, hippie way. Yeah. I remember her stories of still being in her government job. She was working in local government, and she would do tarot readings at her desk. It was totally against company culture, but because she was comfortable with herself, she was able to just be herself, and not in a a pushy, shove it in everybody's face way. But if someone was interested, then she'd be willing to talk to them about those things that she valued or found interesting outside of work. And I think that's it, right? So it's not that you hide your weirdness. You're comfortable with it. So it's kind of not a question whether you express it or not. You can feel when it's appropriate to express and when it's not appropriate.
And you're not pushing it. You're just naturally letting it be.
Exactly. Just like you don't ask yourself whether it's appropriate to, I don't know, to talk about finances or like ask people about their salaries or like sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah.
And you know when that is, right? But if it's something you're interested in, then you have those conversations and that's okay. So I really think it's a matter of being comfortable with who you are.
And that's really hard sometimes, to know who you are and to feel comfortable with that, especially when the stuff that you like is different.
It gets easier as you get older, though.
Yeah, it does.
That's one benefit of getting older. You kind of understand yourself better and care about other people's opinions a whole lot less.
Yay, 40s. So another thing that we're talking about when we were discussing this topic before we got on air was guilty pleasures. So that idea that we have to be ashamed of some of the things that we like because we listen to a certain kind of music or we like a certain kind of TV. And that's just another expression of ourselves. And I think sometimes when we do talk about the things that we like, that's what attracts people to us because we form those connections.
Yeah, and even like outside of a business context, right? Like when we talk about the things we like, we're kind of just being okay with everything. And we're letting people immediately know whether they want to pursue that conversation or relationship or not. So same goes for making new friends or making friends with your colleagues or in any situation at all, right?
Yeah.
I know, okay, I'm just going to ask you, do you have any guilty pleasures, Holly?
Yeah, I'm kind of ashamed of the music I listen to, like when I exercise, like when I go on a run.
Okay, what do you listen to?
No, just shitty pop music. I don't listen to a lot of music, and like my musical taste kind of got stuck in like the 80s and 90s. So.
Mine too.
So when I listen to exercise music, like when I go for a run, I listen to modern music, but I listen to like really just mainstream pop music. So I'm kind of embarrassed of that. And I've been, which is ridiculous. Like, who cares? It's got a great beat for running. Like, why am I ashamed of that?
Yeah, it's really silly, right? Like, I listen to a lot of 90s and 80s and even 70s and early 2000s music when I run, or probably just when I run, actually, or sometimes when I go walking. But like, it's cheesy music, and it's because I call it a guilty pleasure. Well, I didn't listen to it for years because my husband is a musician. And so there's a lot of kind of quality music in our house, like actual good music, But like, I don't listen to music for that.
Yeah.
Although I do like some of the stuff that he listens to as well. But the 90s music and 80s music, it's more of an emotional connection for me. Like, I listen to music for the nostalgia aspect.
Absolutely.
But I still felt like it was a bit of a guilty pleasure, and I didn't listen to it forever. And the other kind of music that I really like is show tunes. I'm a big Broadway and West End fan and a singer. And just recently, I don't know why, like this has been missing from my life for years, like literally, like years and years and years, because nobody else in my house likes that kind of music. I just kind of let it go. But I really like it. Like, I like to turn on, karaoke versions of these songs and just belt stuff out or like just have them on in the background and sing along. I really enjoy that. And so recently I made a playlist called Joanna Loves to Sing.
I like that.
And I put all of these show tunes on there that I like to sing. And I've been singing them, like I put it on when I'm in the shower or like sometimes when I'm doing stuff in the kitchen. And it's really nice, but it was a guilty pleasure that I hid for years. And why?
Yeah.
No good reason, except for most people don't like that stuff. It's uncool.
Yeah. But I think for people who do like that stuff, and there are plenty of people who like that stuff, Like, now that they hear that, they're going to be like, oh, I wonder what musicals Joanna likes. Like, what's your favorite musical?
If you're wondering that, then send me an email or PM me on Facebook and I will let you know. I have lots of favorite musicals.
So, I think this is part of expressing ourselves. And we're talking about words that are overused, and authenticity or authentic is one of them. But really, talking about this stuff, our guilty pleasures, the weird stuff that we do, that's part of us expressing our authentic selves. And again, I'm aware as I say that how overused that phrase is. But if you're running a business, that's really important to express your authentic self. And even if you're not running a business, just in your life, whatever it is that you do, why would you not want to be yourself? It's so stressful and dissatisfying trying to pretend to be something else.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're not being yourself, then you're not giving people who are your natural friends and contacts and clients and partners and whatever, you're not giving them opportunity to come your way, right? Because it's like the people who do come your way are attracted to something that's not real in you. So maybe something you were pretend. So then those relationships won't be fulfilling.
Yeah.
And you'll always feel a little bit empty, a little bit dissatisfied. So if that's how you're feeling, look at this. See, like, what are you ashamed of? Like, is it your music or your taste in TV or something else? Or like that you like certain kinds of clothes and not other kinds of clothes? Like, what is that? And let yourself be a little bit more you.
Yeah. So maybe like if you're the kind of person who likes to journal, maybe sit down and like make a list of all the stuff that you love, but you're ashamed of. Like, what are your guilty pleasures in music, in film, in television, in clothing, in any kind of cultural stuff, entertainment, foods? Like, what foods are you ashamed of? I don't know.
I'm a little bit ashamed that my favorite food is pizza. Like, I feel like, seriously, like, I feel that as a conscious person and into spiritual stuff and like all these stuff, like, I shouldn't like pizza. Like, it's almost like I should know better, you know?
You should know better. If you were truly a spiritual person, your favorite food would be salad.
I know, right? Well, I know. I constantly feel like my favorite food should be salad. You know, so these things can show up in really different ways. You know, or like I'm slightly ashamed that I really like red wine.
What? That's pretty mainstream. Like, lots of people drink red wine.
But I have a glass most days. You know, maybe two even, and it's something that's people are always talking about reducing or like, and so I'm like, but I don't want to. Like, why would you do that? So, and I just really like it, and it's because I'm judging myself against a standard of, I don't know, like perfect yoga health.
Yeah, which is ridiculous.
I'm not putting any toxins into my body or whatever. And so it's become a little bit of a shame thing, you know? That I almost have to defend. I feel like I have to defend.
Yeah. Well, I'll just come out and say one of my favorite foods is bacon, so that's totally not spiritual. Bacon makes everything better. I put bacon in my salads.
My husband also thinks that bacon makes anything better. He'll even eat a Brussels sprout if there's bacon.
Yum.
Yeah, so I don't know, like, I just think the more we're willing to admit what we really like and what we don't like, it just makes us more okay. That can only be a good thing,
Exactly.
When you admit yourself more, that can only be a good thing. It can only create more closeness, more intimacy, more depth in your life.
Yeah, it's about giving ourselves permission to be ourselves and express ourselves and share the stuff that we like. And I really think it is like giving ourselves permission to do this. Like, it's okay.
I think I'll do maybe I'll do an email or a blog post with a list of things that I like but shouldn't like.
All of your guilty pleasures. I'm trying to think of more of mine. I don't know.
Yeah, I have many. And every time I talk about the things that I like judge myself for, maybe that's what, if you want to, listeners, if you want to explore this is probably a good question. Like, what do you judge yourself for?
Yeah.
Like where do you think you're wrong?
Ooh.
Because whenever I talk about the things that I think, like I shouldn't feel or that are a bit wrong about me, like people are like, you should totally talk about that. Like the fact that I don't really like nature so much.
But you do, as long as it doesn't touch you.
Yes, indeed. But like.
But if you were really spiritual, you would like to touch nature.
Yeah, and like for years, like I'd have like, energy practitioners be like, all you need to do is walk barefoot in your garden. I'd be like, okay. And
never gonna happen.
Like, that's like my worst nightmare, like that's just not, it's just never going to happen. With many years of self-awareness and self-kindness, self-acceptance work, like I'm able to say these things and be okay with the fact that I don't like to be too close to nature. I'm squeamish. I don't just don't like it. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But when I talk about it, people are like, oh, you should talk about that more because it's interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe to conclude, we can talk about some other examples of people who we think do this well.
Yep.
Who show themselves really, who aren't afraid to totally be themselves. We already mentioned Leonie Dawson.
Yep. So another person whom I've mentioned so much on the podcast is Fabeku, whom I really love. And I've done one of his programs and I had a one-to-one session with him of last month, I think it was. He does business differently. He has an email list, but he never uses it. He basically just has a Facebook group and that's how he engages with people. Facebook group. And he has these very specific rules on how you can get into the group. Like you have to know someone who's already in there. And that's how he markets. And he's built this amazing community of people who really love what he does. And he's really into magic. And he's really into weird stuff. And he talks about his cat. And
his shoes.
And his shoes. He's really into shoes. And he shares a lot of really kind of, I don't want to say heartwarming, but stories about his engagements with people that he comes across with in life, just like people he meets at the grocery store or walking down the street or stuff he observes. And it's so different, but it's really just him being him. And he's a very different person, so it stands out. And yeah, he just does things very differently.
Yeah. The other two examples we have on our list are also yours, Holly, so I'll let you explain why.
Yeah, so another person is Kat Laterzo, who's a business person. She used to be a personal trainer, but she's been teaching business and coaching business for years. She's been on my podcast. I really like her because she just says whatever the she wants, and she's really triggering to people. She's very out there. Like, her energy is just very like... And I like that she triggers people because you don't necessarily have to agree with everything she says or anything that she says, but I think she's very different in the way she does things. And I feel like she's very unfiltered in how she expresses herself.
I like that word, actually, unfiltered.
Yeah. And
maybe that's also something to journal on. Like, where do you filter yourself? Or where do you think, in what situations or about what topics do you feel like you need a filter? Because if you actually let go, something bad would happen. People would judge you or stick you in the crazy box.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's what attracts me to her, is that I've never done any work with her. Like, I've read some of her books, but what attracts me to her is that she's so unfiltered and she just has the guts to say what she wants to say. And she gets a lot of hate for it because she's very triggering.
She does.
And the other person who's very triggering, and I don't know why, because she's just doing her own thing, and I really love her, is Amanda Palmer. Like, she's not in the business world. She's a musician, but she's been independent for years. She's doing things differently. And she's very much herself. And really triggers people, which I find so fascinating because she's just doing her thing. But again, in a very different way. She's not doing the mainstream music thing. She's doing the independent thing. She's on Patreon. She's had like the most successful Kickstarter for a musician. Yeah. Like, she's kind of forging a new path for musicians. And I guess maybe that's what triggers people, because she's doing things differently.
I think it's always triggering for people when they see someone like being truly authentic, because they know that they're not. Like, deep down, like, if you're triggered by stuff like that, you know that you're not being authentic.
Yeah.
And so, like, you don't want other people to have that permission, because then you'll have to show your stuff as well, and you don't want to show yours.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's totally normal. But I think, like, I don't know, like, I really respect, I notice the people who are different, and I really respect the guts, as you say, to really be yourself and really speak your mind. And I just think that it just challenges your thinking and your ideas, and the way you look at things. And so you don't have to agree with the person or like the way they're doing things, but it'll make you it'll just add perspective.
Yeah.
And that is always a good thing, right? Because we can get very stuck in our ways and very stuck in the norms, and kind of in a rut.
Yeah.
And so these people, they challenge us. They make us stop.
Yeah.
And go, hey, there is a different way. Hey, I didn't think of it this way.
Yeah.
Or, and I think that's really important, because otherwise we just become sheep and following the herd the whole time. So we need these people to be speaking up.
Yeah, we need these people who are breaking the rules and doing things differently, because it just shows us that there are multiple ways of doing things, and that our way is another valid way.
Indeed. So I think there's a real place for the people who are willing to stand up and say things that might be unpopular or triggering, whatever it is. There will always be someone who agrees with you. So there might be a lot of people who disagree with you, but there will always be someone who agrees with you. I have never seen a situation, even when I thought I was being super courageous and I thought my opinion was like total opposite to to what everybody else was thinking. And when I expressed it, people would be like, oh, I secretly think that too.
Exactly. But secretly think that too, not openly think that too. It's important. Sorry.
We're seeing the same thing.
It's so important to speak up and share your weirdness.
Yes. So even though it's difficult, so this is kind of what we started with. Like, we know that it's difficult. Yeah. Holly has been talking about her conversations with trees. I'm starting to talk more about parallel realities. It's just as difficult for us as it is for you to talk about the things that you are passionate about and really truly believe in and have a need to delve deeper into or express, because you can't delve deeper into those things without putting them out there, because you don't exist in a vacuum. You need the response, you need the community, you need those other people. So it's not any more difficult for you than it is for us. It's difficult for everybody, and we know why. We talked about why. So maybe now that you know why or have thought about why, it'll make it that little bit easier. And so just be yourself.
Yeah.
Even if it is a bit difficult.
Be yourself and express yourself.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say is that, like, this was a journey for me to get here. Like, I have done a ton of mindset work to get here. I have done a ton of work on my beliefs to get here. Like I have done so much work with myself on visibility and being willing to step up. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and was like, right then, I'm going to go on national television and talk about talking to trees. It was a journey for me to get here.
I think that's a really important point. Like, it's not overnight.
Yeah.
I've also, I've been kind of secretly talking about parallel realities for probably about 3 years, right? Remember, Holly, even at No Limits at the conference that we were both part of, that was actually a really funny story. And like, all these signs in my life pointed in the same direction, and I just ignored them. Because I had a whole speech prepared, and then the person who went before me basically said the same thing I was going to say. And I went to Holly and went, I don't have a speech anymore because she's just said everything I was going to say. And Holly was like, well, what do you need to talk about? Like, why would this be happening? And I was like, parallel realities, of course,
Of course.
Yeah. And then I thought that was going to set me forward, and then I kind of conveniently just put it to the side again and forgot. And so it's also been a journey of many years to get to this place of being willing to talk about it more openly and to admit what I believe, about it and how I use it and all these things. So not an overnight thing.
No, it's not. But I think once you start the ball rolling, it opens up a whole bunch of new avenues that you couldn't even see before.
I agree. So do it.
Yay! All right, so let's wrap this up. If anyone has any questions about this, or if anyone wants to hear more about this, I don't know. If you have any questions, if you want to get in touch, you can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or
Joanna@joannahennon.com, or PM me on any of the social media. I'm Joanna Hennon throughout.
Cool. All right. have a great week. And we really encourage you to like do some journaling or think about how you can step up and express yourself more in the world and openly express your differences and your weird things. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this podcast. It would mean the world to me. Next week's episode, I will be back with another solo show, and I don't know what that's about yet, but it will be timely. I've been doing these pretty much just the week before they go live, which I'm really, really enjoying because it means that the topic is about something that's timely to me. So I hope you enjoyed this, and remember to visit hollywharton.com/309 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.